Emma was only 16 when her world began to fall apart. She lived in a small town called Millbrook with her grandmother, Rose, in a tiny flat above the old bakery. The bakery had been closed for months now, and the bills kept piling up on their kitchen table like autumn leaves that nobody wanted to sweep away. Every morning, Emma would wake up to the sound of her grandmother's worried sighs as Rose counted the little money they had left. The numbers never seemed to be enough. Emma would get ready for school, eat a small breakfast of toast and jam, and kiss her grandmother goodbye before stepping out into the cold morning air. The walk to school took Emma through the heart of Millbrook, and each day the town looked a little more empty than before. Mr. Johnson's hardware store had closed last month, with a big for sale sign hanging crookedly in the window. The flower shop where Emma used to stop and smell the roses had boards nailed across its front door. Even the old post office had reduced its hours because there weren't enough letters and packages to keep it busy all day. Emma's friends talked about their families moving away to find better jobs in London or Manchester. Sarah's family had already packed up their house and moved to Birmingham, where her father found work at a factory. Tom's mother got a job at a hospital 2 towns over, and they were planning to leave before Christmas. Emma felt like everyone she cared about was slowly disappearing from her life. The community center where Emma used to spend her afternoons after school was having its own troubles. Mrs. Harper, the center's manager, was a kind woman with silver hair and gentle eyes who had been taking care of the place for 20 years. But even she couldn't hide her worry anymore. The town council had sent letters saying there wasn't enough money to keep the center running past the end of winter. Emma loved the community center because it felt like a second home to her. She had learned to play piano there when she was 8 years old. She had made friendship bracelets in the craft room and played board games with other children whose parents were working late. The center had a small library where Emma could sit quietly and read books about faraway places and exciting adventures. One cold winter evening in December, Emma was helping Mrs. Harper clean out the basement of the community center. They were sorting through old boxes and forgotten furniture, deciding what could be donated and what needed to be thrown away. The basement smelled like dust and old paper, and their footsteps echoed in the empty space. Emma was moving a heavy box of old books when she noticed something glinting behind a tall wooden cabinet. She squeezed between the cabinet and the wall and found an old brass candle holder sitting on a small shelf. Inside the holder was a thick white candle that looked like it had never been lit, even though everything else in the basement was covered in years of dust and spider webs. "What's this, Mrs. Harper?" Emma called out, carefully lifting the candle holder in her hands. Mrs. Harper came over and examined the candle with curiosity. She wiped her hands on her apron and smiled gently. "I've never seen that before, dear. How strange that it's so clean when everything else down here is so dusty. Perhaps it belonged to the people who built this place many years ago. The community center is almost 50 years old, you know." She paused and looked round the cold, dark basement. "Why don't you light it, Emma? This old basement could use some warmth and light while we're working down here." Emma felt excited about lighting the mysterious candle. She found a box of matches on one of the shelves and carefully struck one against the side. The match flared to life with a small pop, and Emma touched the flame to the white wick of the candle. What happened next made Emma gasp with wonder. The candle came to life with a steady, warm flame that seemed much brighter than any candle she had ever seen before. The light was golden and warm, and it danced gently as if it were happy to finally be burning. As the candlelight spread across the basement walls, Emma felt something deep inside her chest that she hadn't felt in months. She felt hope creeping back into her heart like sunshine after a long, dark winter. Mrs. Harper stood beside Emma, both of them watching the beautiful flame with amazement. Just then, a strong winter wind began to blow outside, rattling the old windows of the community center and making the building creak and groan. Emma watched the candle carefully, expecting the flame to flicker and dance in the draft. But something incredible happened instead. The candle's flame didn't even move. It burned steady and strong and bright, as if nothing in the world could ever put it out. No amount of wind or cold could touch this special light. Emma and Mrs. Hopper finished their work in the basement, but Emma couldn't stop looking at the remarkable candle. That night, she carefully carried it upstairs to the main room of the community center. She placed it on the old piano in the corner where everyone could see it, and immediately the warm light filled the entire space, for the first time in many weeks. The community center felt alive again. Emma smiled as she looked round the room, imagining all the people who might come to see this wonderful light that refused to go out. News about Emma's magical candle spread through Millbrook faster than butter melting on warm toast. People talked about it at the grocery store, at the bus stop, and over their garden fences. Some said the flame never flickered even in the strongest wind. Others whispered that sitting near it made their hearts feel lighter somehow. The first person to visit was old Mr. Thomas from Maple Street. He was a tall, thin man with kind eyes who had lived alone in his small house ever since his wife Margaret passed away 3 years ago. Mr. Thomas rarely spoke to anyone anymore, and his neighbors often worried about him eating his meals by himself and spending long evenings with only the television for company. On a Tuesday evening, Mr. Thomas quietly pushed open the door of the community center. He stood in the doorway for a moment, looking uncertain, as if he might change his mind and leave. Emma was sitting near the candle, reading a book for school, when she noticed him. "Hello, Mr. Thomas," Emma said softly, not wanting to startle him. "Would you like to come sit by the candle? It's very warm here." Mr. Thomas walked slowly across the room and settled into one of the comfortable chairs near the piano. He stared at the steady flame for a long time without saying anything. Finally, he spoke in a voice that sounded rusty from not being used very much. "It reminds me of the candle Margaret used to light during our Sunday dinners," he said quietly. "We always ate by candlelight because she said it made even simple food taste special." His eyes grew watery, but he smiled a little. Those were better times. Emma didn't know what to say, so she simply sat with Mr. Thomas in comfortable silence, both of them watching the gentle flame dance in its brass holder. Word continued to spread, and soon more people began to find their way to the community center in the evenings. Mrs. Davies, a worried-looking woman with tired eyes, brought her twin boys Jack and Oliver. The boys were 8 years old and full of energy, but lately they had been having trouble paying attention in school and getting into fights with other children. Their father lost his job at the factory 6 months ago. Mrs. Davies explained to Emma and Mrs. Hopper one evening. "He's been looking for work, but there aren't many jobs around here anymore. The boys can feel how stressed we are at home, and I think it's affecting them." Jack and Oliver were fascinated by the candle that never went out. They sat cross-legged on the floor, asking Emma dozens of questions about where it came from and how it could burn for so many days without melting away. Emma didn't have answers to their questions, but she enjoyed their curiosity and excitement. Young Lucy, who was only 14 and lived 3 streets away, started coming to the community center too. She would arrive carrying her baby brother, James, who was just 6 months old. Lucy's mother worked double shifts at the hospital in the next town, trying to earn enough money to support her small family. So Lucy often took care of James in the evenings. "It's nice to have somewhere warm to come with James," Lucy told Emma one night as she rocked her brother gently in her arms. "Our flat gets so cold, and sometimes James cries a lot. But here, near the candle, he seems peaceful and happy." As more people discovered the community center and its special candle, Emma decided to create something she called Circle Time, every evening at 7 o'clock. She would range chairs in a circle round the candle and invite anyone who wanted to come to sit and share whatever was on their heart. Some evenings, people talked about their worries. Mrs. Davies shared her fears about finding enough money to buy Christmas presents for Jack and Olive. Mr. Thomas talked about how lonely he felt during the long winter nights. Lucy worried about her mother working so hard and getting sick from exhaustion. Other evenings, people shared happier memories and stories. Mr. Thomas told funny tales about the mischief he and Margaret used to get into when they were young. Mrs. Davies remembered family vacations to the seaside when the twins were smaller. Emma shared stories about helping her grandmother bake bread in the old bakery when it was still open. Mrs. Harper always made sure to have a pot of hot tea and a plate of biscuits ready for a circle time. She would move quietly round the group, filling cups and making sure everyone felt welcome and comfortable. The community center began to smell like cinnamon and warmth instead of dust and loneliness. One evening, as Emma and her grandmother Rose walked home together after Circle Time, Emma felt more hopeful than she had in months. "This candle brings out the best in people, Grandmama," Emma said, swinging their joined hands as they walked down the quiet street. "Everyone seems kinder and more caring when they're sitting near it." Rose squeezed Emma's hand gently and smiled at her granddaughter. "I think you're the one bringing out the best in people, love. The candle is just giving them a reason to come together. You're the one who makes them feel safe to share their hearts." But not everyone in Millbrook believed in what Emma was doing. Mr. Peterson, a stern man in his 50s who worked for the town council, decided to visit the community center one evening to see what all the fuss was about. He arrived during Circle Time, wearing his best suit and a frown that seemed permanently fixed on his face. Peterson stood near the door, listening to the quiet conversations and watching the people gathered round Emma's candle. After a few minutes, he cleared his throat loudly to get everyone's attention. "This is all very nice," he said in a voice that suggested he didn't think it was nice at all. He gestured round the room with his hand. "But it won't pay the bills that are piling up. This building will still be sold next month, just like the town council decided. You're just giving people false hope, and that's not fair to them." Emma felt her cheeks burn hot with embarrassment. She looked round at all the faces of people who had become like family to her over the past few weeks. They all looked confused and hurt by Mr. Peterson's harsh words. But Mrs. Harper stood up slowly and faced Mr. Peterson with dignity. Her voice was gentle but strong when she spoke. "Perhaps hope isn't false if it brings people together, Mr. Peterson. Perhaps that's exactly what this town needs right now." Mr. Peterson shook his head and left without saying goodbye to anyone. After he was gone, Emma stared at the candle and felt doubt creeping into her heart like cold air through a crack in the window. Could a simple candle really make a difference when everything else seemed to be falling apart round them? 3 weeks after Mr. Peterson's visit, dark clouds began to gather over Millbrook like a thick grey blanket. The weather forecast on the radio warned that a powerful storm was coming. But nobody in the small town was prepared for what would happen next. The storm arrived on a Wednesday night with winds so fierce they sounded like wild animals howling outside every window. Rain poured down from the sky as if someone had turned on enormous water taps that couldn't be turned off. The drops were so heavy they sounded like tiny pebbles hitting the rooftops and windows of every house in Millbrook. Emma lay in her small bed above the old bakery, listening to the terrible noise outside. Water was dripping steadily into metal buckets that she and her grandmother Rose had placed all round their tiny flat. The old building's roof had several leaks, and with each gust of wind, more water seemed to find its way inside. "Emma, dear, can you help me move this bucket?" Rose called from the kitchen. "The leak above the stove is getting worse." Emma climbed out of bed and helped her grandmother position buckets and towels to catch the water. They worked together in the dim light of their small lamp, moving furniture away from the wet spots and trying to keep their few belongings dried out by Thursday morning. The storm had knocked down power lines all over town. Most of Millbrook was without electricity, including Emma's flat and the community center. The main street had flooded so badly that water reached halfway up the doors of the shops. Mr. Peterson's office at the town hall had 3 inches of water covering the floor. But when Emma made her way carefully through the flooded streets to check on the community center, she discovered something wonderful. Even though the building had lost its electricity just like everywhere else, her special candle was still burning as bright as ever. The warm golden light filled the main room and made the old building feel safe and welcoming despite the terrible weather outside. Soon, people began arriving at the community center. They came in small groups, carrying flashlights and wearing their warmest coats and boots. Families who had lost power in their homes needed somewhere warm to wait out the storm. The community center, with its steadily burning candle, became like a lighthouse for people looking for comfort and safety. Mrs. Davies arrived with Jack and Oliver, carrying blankets and a thermos of hot soup. Mr. Thomas came from his cold, dark house, bringing a bag of bread rolls to share with everyone. Lucy appeared with baby James, wrapped in thick blankets, grateful to have somewhere warm for her little brother. Emma and Mrs. Harper worked together to make the community center as comfortable as possible for their unexpected guests. They made sandwiches with the bread that people had brought, using supplies from the center's small kitchen. Mrs. Harper found extra blankets in the storage closet, and Emma helped range chairs and cushions so everyone could sit near the candles. Warmth, the older residents, like Mr. Thomas and Mrs. Harper, began telling stories to help keep the children calm when the thunder crashed loudly overhead. Mr. Thomas had a wonderful deep voice, and he told tales about brave knights and clever princesses that made Jack and Oliver forget about the scary sounds outside. Mrs. Harper shared funny stories about things that had happened at the community center over the years. But while Emma was helping everyone else feel better, her own heart was heavy with worry. That morning, before the storm had gotten too bad, a letter had arrived from their landlord. Emma had watched her grandmother's face grow pale as she read the official-looking paper. The letter said that if Rose couldn't pay 3 months' worth of back rent by the end of the week, she and Emma would have to leave their home above the bakery. They owed more money than Emma had ever imagined, and she didn't know where they could possibly find such a large amount. That night, after all the storm refugees had returned to their homes, Emma sat alone by the candle. Tears ran down her cheeks as she stared into the steady flame. The community center felt very quiet after being so full of people all day. "I don't know what to do," Emma whispered to the flickering light, as if the candle might somehow give her an answer. "How can I help everyone else when I can't even help my own family? What good am I if I can't take care of Grandma?" The candle continued to burn peacefully, but it couldn't solve Emma's problems or make the rent money appear like magic. Friday morning brought even worse news. When Emma arrived at the community center, she found the front door hanging open and chairs scattered across the floor. Someone had broken into the building during the night while the storm was still raging. Books were thrown everywhere, and the small kitchen area had been searched roughly. But the sight that made Emma's heart stop completely was her precious candle lying on its side on the cold floor. Knocked over from its place on the piano, Emma rushed across the room, expecting to find that the flame had finally gone out. But when she knelt down and looked closely, she gasped in amazement. The candle was still burning, even lying sideways on the hard floor, separated from its brass holder. The flame continued to glow steadily and bright. "How is that possible?" Mrs. Harper wondered aloud when she arrived and saw the mess. She helped Emma carefully lift the candle and set it upright in its holder again. Emma didn't understand how the candle could still be burning after being knocked over. But seeing that little light refuse to give up made something strong grow inside her chest. If this small candle could survive being knocked down and still keep shining, maybe she could survive her troubles too. That afternoon, Emma made one of the hardest decisions of her young life. She went to her bedroom and took out a small metal box where she had been saving money for months to buy a new winter coat. Her old coat was thin and had holes in the pockets, and she had been looking forward to having something warm and new. Emma counted the money carefully. It wasn't nearly enough to pay all the rent they owed, but it was something. She took the bills downstairs and placed them gently in her grandmother's weathered hands. "This won't solve everything, Grandmama," Emma said quietly, "but maybe it will help." Rosa's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the money, knowing how hard Emma had worked and saved to earn it. Emma's act of giving her coat money to help her grandmother didn't go unnoticed in the small town of Millbrook. Mrs. Harper, who had a kind heart and worried about Emma's family, had quietly mentioned their difficult situation to a few trusted friends. She didn't want to embarrass Emma or her grandmother, but she felt that sometimes people needed to know when their neighbors were struggling. What happened next surprised everyone, including Emma herself. On Saturday morning, just 2 days after Emma had given away her winter coat money, there was a gentle knock at the door of their flat above the old bakery. Emma opened the door to find Mr. Thomas standing there, holding 2 large paper bags filled with groceries. Thomas was not a man who usually visited people or made social calls. Since his wife Margaret had passed away, he mostly kept to himself, only nodding politely when he saw neighbors on the street. So Emma was very surprised to see him at their door. "Good morning, Mr. Thomas," Emma said, wondering why he had come to visit them so early in the day. Thomas cleared his throat and looked a bit uncomfortable, as if he wasn't used to talking to people very much. "I have too much food in my house," he said in his gruff voice, holding out the bags toward Emma. "These things will just go bad if I don't give them to someone who can use them." Emma took the heavy bags and looked inside. They were filled with wonderful things like fresh bread, milk, cheese, apples, and even some chocolate biscuits. Everything looked new and fresh, as if it had just been bought at the grocery store that morning. "Thank you so much, Mr. Thomas," Emma said, feeling grateful and a little confused. "Are you sure you don't need these things?" Mr. Thomas waved his hand as if the groceries weren't important. But Emma noticed that his eyes looked kind and a little sad. She suspected that he had bought these groceries especially for her and her grandmother, even though he pretended he had too much food. Word about Emma's family situation continued to spread quietly through Millbrook, but not in a gossipy or mean way. People shared the information because they cared and wanted to help, not because they wanted to talk about other people's problems. Mrs. Davies, who had been coming to Circle Time at the community center with her twin boys, decided to do something special. She spoke to the minister at the local church and organized a small fundraiser during Sunday service. Even though many families in Millbrook didn't have much money themselves, they each contributed what they could afford. Some people gave a few pounds from their weekly grocery money. Others brought items they could spare from their homes, like warm blankets or canned food. Mrs. Johnson, whose husband had owned the closed hardware store, brought a box of useful things like batteries, candles, and soap. Little Lucy's mother, whose name was Rebecca, worked at the hospital in the next town. She was a nurse who took care of sick patients during long night shifts. When she heard about Emma's situation, she quietly spread the word to her co-workers at the hospital. The doctors and nurses there decided to take up a small collection to help a young girl who was taking care of her grandmother. All of these kind acts happened without Emma knowing about them at first. People in Millbrook were working together quietly, like busy bees in a hive, to help their neighbors during a difficult time. But the biggest surprise of all came from someone Emma never would have expected to help them on a quiet Tuesday evening. Emma was at the community center by herself, sitting near the candle and trying to read a book for school. The building felt very peaceful, and the steady light from the candle made it easy to focus on her homework. She was reading about history and faraway places when she heard footsteps at the front door. Emma looked up and was shocked to see Mr. Peterson walking into the community center. This was the same man who had come weeks before to tell everyone they were giving people false hope. Emma felt nervous and wasn't sure what he might say this time, but Mr. Peterson looked different. Somehow, his face wasn't wearing the same frowns before, and he moved more slowly, as if he was thinking carefully about something important. "Hello, Emma," Mr. Peterson said quietly, sitting down in one of the chairs across from her. "I hope you don't mind if I sit here for a few minutes." Emma shook her head, still feeling confused about why he had come. Peterson was quiet for a long moment, looking at the candle that continued to burn steadily in its brass holder. Finally, he spoke again, and his voice sounded different than Emma remembered. "I owe you an apology," he said, looking directly at Emma. "I've been watching what you've done here over the past few weeks. How you've brought people together and made them feel like they belong somewhere. I was wrong when I said you were giving people false hope." He paused and took a deep breath before continuing. "My own mother used to run a community center in London when I was about your age. I spent many afternoons there after school, just like you do here. She always said that the most important thing a community center could do was make people feel like they mattered, like they had a place where they belonged." Mr. Peterson reached into his briefcase and pulled out several official-looking papers. "I'd forgotten what these places really mean to people, but you reminded me. I've been working with some businesses in the county, and we think we might have found a way to keep this place open." Emma felt her heart leap with excitement, but she tried to stay calm and listen carefully. "It won't be easy," Mr. Peterson continued, "and everyone in the community will need to help with fundraising and volunteer work. But it's possible to save the community center if people are willing to work together." He looked at Emma with respect and admiration. "The real miracle here isn't that candle, Emma. It's you. You've reminded this entire town what it means to be a real community, where people take care of each other." That evening, Emma practically ran home to tell her grandmother everything that had happened. She burst through the door of their small flat, breathless with excitement and good news. Rose was sitting at their little kitchen table, and Emma noticed that the special candle was burning there too. Emma had started bringing it home some evenings, and its warm light made their small flat feel cozy and safe. Emma told her grandmother about Mr. Peterson's visit, about his apology, and about the possibility of saving the community center. She also told Rose about all the kind things their neighbors had been doing to help them. Rose smiled and pulled Emma into a warm, tight hug that smelled like lavender soap and fresh bread. "You know, dear," Rose said softly, I think you've become like that candle. No matter what tries to knock you down, you keep shining your light for others, and when you do that, your light helps other people find their own light too. Emma looked at the candle burning peacefully on their kitchen table and realized that her grandmother might be right. Maybe the real magic had never been in the candle at all. Spring arrived in Millbrook earlier than anyone expected that year. The snow melted quickly, revealing green grass and tiny flower buds on the trees along Main Street. The warm sunshine seemed to breathe new life into the small town, and everywhere Emma looked, she could see signs that things were getting better. The community center had not only been saved from closing, but it was busier and more alive than it had been in years. True to his word, Mr. Peterson had worked with local businesses to find funding, and the town council had agreed to keep the building open. But more than that, the people of Millbrook had discovered something they didn't know they were missing, a place where they truly belonged. Mrs. Harper, energized by all the positive changes, had started a cooking class for teenagers on Wednesday afternoons. She taught young people like Emma how to make simple, healthy meals on a small budget. The kitchen in the community center filled with wonderful smells of fresh bread, vegetable soup, and homemade biscuits. The teenagers learned not just how to cook, but how to take care of themselves and their families. Dotmer Thomas, who had become much less shy since joining Circle Time, surprised everyone by offering to teach woodworking classes. He brought his tools and workbench from his couch and set up a workshop in the community center's back room. He patiently showed anyone who was interested how to sand wood until it was smooth, how to measure and cut pieces that fit together perfectly, and how to create beautiful, useful things with their own hands. Emma watched with delight as 8-year-old Oliver, one of Mrs. Davies' twin boys, carefully carved his first wooden toy horse under Mr. Thomas's gentle guidance. The old man's face lit up with pride as if Oliver were his own grandson, and Oliver beamed with happiness at creating something special all by himself. Emma had started her own program too, a reading circle for younger children that met every Saturday morning. She would sit near the original candle, which still burned steadily on the piano, and read stories about brave children, magical adventures, and faraway places. The children would sit on colorful cushions on the floor, their eyes wide with wonder as Emma's voice brought the stories to life. Emma's own family situation had improved greatly over the spring months. The money that their neighbors had quietly collected had helped Rose pay the overdue rent, and they were able to stay in their little flat above the old bakery. Even better news came when the new owner of the bakery decided to reopen it and offered Emma a part-time job working there after school and on weekends. Emma loved working in the bakery, learning to knead dough and shape loaves of bread just like her grandmother had taught her years ago. The smell of fresh baking filled their flat again, and Emma earned enough money to help with their daily expenses. She even managed to save a little bit each week for her future. The most wonderful surprise came in late spring when Emma received a letter that made her grandmother cry tears of joy. Emma had been awarded a scholarship to study social work at the university in the big city. She would be able to go to school and learn how to help people and communities, just like she had been doing in Millbrook on a warm summer evening in July. Just a few weeks before Emma would leave for a university, she stood in the community center, looking at something that filled her heart with more joy than she could have ever imagined. The original candle still burned brightly in its brass holder on the piano, just as steady and beautiful as the first night Emma had lit it. But now it was no longer alone. Surrounding it were dozens of other candles in holders of all shapes and sizes. Each person who regularly came to the community center had brought their own candle to add to the growing collection. There were tall white candles like Emma's original one, short fat candles in glass jars, colorful candles that smelled like flowers, and even small tea lights that twinkled like stars. Together, they created a warm, golden glow that filled the entire main room of the community centre with light and warmth. Young Jack Davies, Oliver's twin brother, stood next to Emma, staring at the beautiful display with wonder in his eyes. "It's like each person's light is connected to all the others," he said thoughtfully. "Like they're all part of one big, bright light." Emma smiled at Jack's wise observation. "That's exactly right," she replied, putting her hand gently on his shoulder. "When we share our light with others, it doesn't make our own light smaller. It makes the whole world brighter." Mrs. Harper walked over and put her arm round Emma's shoulders in a motherly way. Her eyes were shining with pride and a little bit of sadness, knowing that Emma would be leaving soon. "You should be very proud, dear," Mrs. Harper said softly. "What you started here is spreading to other towns. 3 different communities have contacted me asking if you'll help them start their own circle time gatherings before you go to university." Emma looked round the room at all the faces of people who had become like a second family to her over the past months. Mr. Thomas was patiently showing Oliver how to carve a small wooden bird, his weathered hands guiding the boy's smaller ones. Mrs. Davies was sitting at a table with Lucy's mother Rebecca, helping her practice reading from a book they had chosen together from the community centre's library. Mr. Peterson was in the corner having an animated discussion with several parents about plans for building a new playground behind the community centre. Everyone looked happy and busy and connected to each other in a way that made Emma's heart feel full. As the evening grew later and people began to gather their things to go home, Emma prepared to leave too. She took one last long look at all the candles burning together, their flames dancing gently in the warm summer air that came through the open windows. Standing there surrounded by all that light, Emma realized something important. The real magic had never been about one special candle that wouldn't go out, no matter how wonderful and mysterious it seemed. The real magic was about people choosing to be lights for each other, especially when times were dark and difficult. Emma walked home through the familiar streets of Millbrook, feeling grateful for everything that had happened. Her grandmother Rose was waiting for her at home with a cup of chamomile tea and a warm smile that reminded Emma of sunshine. "How was your last evening at the centre before you leave for university?" Rose asked, settling into her favourite chair. With her own cup of tea, Emma sat down across from her grandmother and thought about everything she had seen and felt that evening. "Perfect," she replied with a contented sigh. "The light will keep burning long after I'm gone, Grandmama, because everyone there has learned how to keep it alive together." That night, as Emma drifted off to sleep in her small bedroom, she could see the warm glow from the community centre through her window. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and adventures, but Emma knew with certainty that no storm would ever be strong enough to put out a light that lived in people's hearts and grew stronger when shared with others. The end.